We like to say last but not least. And in this case, I will acknowledge last is least. I would like you to look for just a moment at this book that you have with you on page 8. And you can see at the head of the chart, you've heard from Dr. Al-Kasheri. You can see that Jay Welsh is just below and to the left of him. And you can see that I do not appear on that chart at all. So what I'll try to do is to describe to you what I believe I've learned in the last 24 hours and in preparation also for coming here. So what I do bring to JAMS and what I hope to share with you is that I grew up with dispute resolution and mediation as a part of my training. I graduated law school 30 years ago, and my very first mediation occurred 5 years later, and it was between the author of two of the authors of the book Getting to Yes. And so JAMS has existed for 35 years. Getting to Yes was written approximately the same time. And so much like a child who grows up understanding that this is a world where they never knew a world without an iPhone, I never knew a legal world without mediation. Right? And so I am a true believer in the oldest sense, and I will try to impart some of that enthusiasm to you today. Well, a question that many people had on their minds prior to the time that I went to law school was, if people were good negotiators, why would you need a mediator? And many people consider themselves to be good negotiators. And yet the field of mediation has flourished. And I'm going to suggest to you that there are three categories of reasons why mediation flourishes. The first one is that in many instances, the parties or their lawyers have discovered or run into psychological impediments that prevent the efficient resolution and settlement of disputes. For example, we know in the world of psychology about something called reactive devaluation, which is that an offer to settle a case may be a perfectly good solution, but if it comes from someone that you think is your enemy, you will reject it merely because it came from your enemy. Well, mediators, acting as a buffer, can actually cause people to hear things that are good ideas that if they were proposed by the opposing client or the opposing attorney would be rejected simply because they were proposed by someone perceived as an adversary. So mediation makes a big difference in that regard because they can cause you to really consider something that you wouldn't otherwise have heard. A second one is that many times there are structural impediments to the resolution of disputes. For example, we see in the United States sometimes that the person who's representing the corporation has a strong interest in defending the decisions that they have made prior. And so what you have is you have a negotiator who cannot say yes even to a good deal, because saying yes to that deal means that they are admitting that they were wrong in the past. Right? And so we have structural issues, principal agent problems we call them, and mediators are very adept at finding ways to shield people from the mistakes that they may have made in the past and allow them to be future-oriented and not really be thinking about where to allocate blame. A third category is what we'll call strategic barriers. Sometimes people make choices as they are proceeding in a conflict, and sometimes they make choices that make the conflict bigger rather than smaller. And as you know, inertia is a very powerful force that once you start down a path, it's very difficult to see an alternative path. And what a mediator brings to the table is a fresh pair of eyes and neutrality. And so often, if, for example, you have held back on stating what your true desires are. And maybe you've asked for something that you don't really want, but you know that the other side cares about it, and you can use it as a concession. Well, sometimes that tactic can work, but sometimes that tactic can backfire miserably. And if you have tried tactics that haven't worked against each other, the relationship can be very sour. And it can take a mediator, a neutral pair of eyes, I think, to help you surmount these strategic barriers and see that the way you have chosen to proceed in this conflict is likely unproductive. And they can offer you a new way to break that inertia. Well, so mediators bring a lot to the table. Part of what they bring is not just the knowledge of law, but in the 30 years that mediation has really started to flourish, an enormous number of fields have impacted the study of mediation. And the mediators that you will meet through the Arab Mediation Center will not be only versed in law, and our training will not be only about law. Our training will relate, of course, to law because they will be resolving legal disputes, and you have to speak the language of law in order to resolve those kinds of disputes. But it's very important to understand economics, sociology, history, interpersonal communication, lessons from political science, lessons from psychology, and now we know lessons from neuroscience. We are blessed to live in an age where we can actually look at the brains of people who are making decisions and see what parts of the brain are acting as they are making a decision or considering something. And great mediators understand that if you are not dealing with people, the people at the table, and you don't understand the people in all their complex dimensions, you don't treat them just as legal beings, but you treat them as full human beings, the study of mediation becomes something that is really the study of human behavior, interpersonal dynamics, and group interaction, right? So when you have, and the reason is these are not subjects that are beyond the scope of understanding of most lawyers, but lawyers are busy practicing law. Mediators are busy understanding people. Right? And so that's a very important part. I've only been in Cairo now for 24 hours, and yet I am buoyantly optimistic that the success that we have seen in the United States for mediation is success that you will enjoy. How can I reach these beliefs within just 24 hours? Because when I hear from the people that I've had the privilege of spending time with, I see a society and a legal structure that is almost precisely mirroring where the United States system was approximately in 1980. Where is that? That's a place where the courts are very crowded, where the world is becoming more increasingly interconnected, where the lines between law and business are starting to break down, and lawyers are doing more than just acting as the lawyer. I'm seeing interest in passing laws. It took a while in the United States. I understand that there have been many attempts here recently to enact mediation laws, and for a variety of political reasons, those laws have been not reached completion. But in the United States, if you look at 1979, 1980, 1981, you will see that we were in exactly the same place, that people were proposing various laws in mediation, and it took more than one attempt to get those laws passed. It took a little while to overcome the inertia that prevented us from moving forward. Well, what I see here is people with legitimate questions. And for example, lawyers have legitimate questions to say, if my case gets mediated and there's a resolution, how will I pay my bills? I make my money from working through litigation. We see judges who say, it's my job to resolve disputes. And so they take ownership in that. We see business people, I think quite rightly, saying, Oh, I'm playing my video again by accident. And you see business people who have questions about whether this new thing, this new way of doing things is really going to be the right way. And what I will say to you is that I have every reason to believe from the experience that happened in the United States that those questions, as legitimate as they are, will all be answered in the affirmative. That you will find, the lawyers will find, that resolving a case effectively and efficiently does not cost them any money. In fact, they have more grateful clients who bring more cases to them. Because when a lawyer is seen as a problem solver, clients like that. Business people who really only care about making sure that their business advances in a good way will discover that this very useful and interesting new tool allows them creative resolution of disputes that are simply not available in court, and that it does in fact save time and money. And judges in the United States who once were concerned that we were competing with them now clearly see us as their ally, and they are some of the biggest sources of business for us. Because cases come before them and they say, this is not a case that needs to spend 10 years before you have a verdict from me. This is a case where you should talk. You should at least try to talk to each other. So mediation started with a brave group of lawyers and business people who said, it's very low cost to try this for one day. It's very low cost to take a pilot case, to take a pilot program. Right? It's very low risk because at the end of the day, the worst thing that happens is you go back to the way that you were doing business before. I know, because of my contact with the folks at the AMC, that you have the mediators. I know because of the quality of people who are in the room right now, that you have the disputes, you have the technical ability, and so I'm hoping that what I'm doing you is inspiring you with a desire. Every lawyer I know has a file at the bottom of their desk that when they look at it, it makes their stomach hurt. Everybody has that email that they don't want to return. I will encourage you to find that case, take it out of the bottom of the pile, and bring it to the Arab Mediation Center. And give them a chance. Because I'm confident that if you do, as my colleagues in the US have done, and give them a chance, you will discover it was one of the best choices that you've ever made. Okay. So, with that, I would really encourage you to ask us questions. I hope that you are skeptical. I hope that you have questions, because having those questions and having that concern is the beginning, right? If you are confident that the way things have always been done is the way that they always should be done, then really there's no reason to change. But if you are questioning, if you think that there's a maybe, this is the time to begin your introduction really into a brave new world that I think you'll find benefits us all.